contact with this woman.
Oh my god. Before we check out Mandalore's Homeworld 3 review, you guys told me that I should check out this video on Genesis Rising. I personally never heard about it before, but most of the games that Mandalore reviews usually have very intriguing stories around them. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this has to offer. But of course, as always, before we get into the video, please make sure to go support the OG. Link to that is at the very top of the description, as always.
Incorrect. Melagio was first. And Melagio was meant to be alone among all things. But Melagio was betrayed.
Betrayed? Betrayed by whom?
God.
What?
Betrayed by God. Also, I'm assuming that character was Melagio, and maybe they were speaking in the third person?
Since the Callisto Protocol brought it up while playing, I thought of a future where humanity becomes genetic freaks. And it reminded me of a game very on track with that, Genesis Rising.
Oh, okay. I don't know too much about Callisto Protocol, only heard that it wasn't exactly the greatest game out there.
And after a brief search, not only does it have no videos on YouTube covering it, but the IMDb page is also a complete shell. It did eventually come out on Steam, but was so broken that it didn't even launch for most people.
Negative.
For those who could run it, they'd be treated to everything being invisible or constant crashing. This was due to several folder directories just being missing. They did make it playable eventually, but on my end, all of the ships were 100% black. It looks to be some kind of shader issue since setting that to medium fixed the ships right up. It still crashed a lot, and we'll go over all the joys of that later. But the point is, even when you could get the game in a box, it was scuffed. Now, there are tons of RTS games out there that have a similar story, but Genesis Rising is such a bizarre blend of madness that it's worth talking about. To sum the game up in a sentence, your spaceships are alive and filled with blood.
Ship destroyed. Blood feast.
Ooh.
But that's only the epidermis of the setting.
So, what? Why? How did humanity come to this conclusion that this is like our next evolution? We basically become like the Tyranids? Our very ships are living organisms? I've personally never seen any sci-fi story with this kind of premise before, so I'm intrigued to see where it goes.
From the credits, I learned that the game is based off an obscure, single-issue Serbian comic called Cruciform. It takes place in the far future where humanity are the galactic villains. It's only a single issue with some interesting art, but the game itself gives all the context you need. After nearly being wiped out by several alien threats, humanity bounced back and are now the rulers of the universe. Not the galaxy, the universe. All other aliens are either wiped out, enslaved, or thralls of humanity.
Jeez, how far into the future is this then? Because, like, the universe is infinite, no? We can just proclaim that?
Those survivors must also worship the human god. We're a brutal regime in the future, led by the Chair of Three, which represents the most important human factions: the military, the judicature, and the state church. What's interesting is that the human god was once a man, who united everyone against the alien threat. He was part man and part god, and it's unclear where he came from or...
Is that you, Big E? It does sound like we're going very much in a Warhammer 40k direction, but this time around we actually succeeded. And well, I guess Horus wasn't there to ruin our day.
How exactly he did what he did. He's known as the Emperor, Savior of Mankind. Now, you may have heard a similar story before, but this one is delivered like an Invader Zim bit.
The aliens, realizing the power of this demagogue, and fearing for their very existence, captured, tortured, and killed him.
Oh.
It looks more like he got jumped after class.
Right?
As a martyr, his message was even more powerful. His death only served to strengthen humanity's resolve.
A new church also arose to guide humanity.
Then there was a new church. Again, not much elaborated on. It feels like it doesn't matter much because the intro rocks. The voice acting throws more ham at you than an exploding butcher's shop.
Right?
And it's being done over what sounds like the Villeneuve Dune theme.
Humankind's foray into space began uneventfully. For 1,000 years,
that's your voice?
spread across the length and breadth of known space.
So what looked like the Strogg almost wiped us out until the Savior saved us. But humanity's biggest achievement was the Organids, living spaceships that would grow, mutate, and then adapt to their environment. No other aliens had mastered these, so within a few thousand years, we just conquered most of existence.
Okay, so that's the reason why. We decided to go this route because of some sort of technological breakthrough, allowing us for ships that could evolve to adapt to the environment, therefore giving us an edge against all of the other aliens' technology. Because obviously technology can't adapt that quickly. Not as quickly as like a actual biomass. Or well, actually thinking about that, that doesn't really make much sense. But it's sci-fi, so I guess we could assume that there was like a heightened evolution rate or whatever that has to do with changing the ship to adapt.
How could you stop it? I mean, these are some virile-looking ships. It sets the stage for a bizarre and dark setting, and that's when the first whiplash hits.
Father, don't be silly. The people celebrate the birth of the Universal Heart. I just happen to be born the same day.
Yes, I suppose you are right. But it is fun to pretend.
You play as a 5-year-old child whose haircutter hates him.
I'm just happy to be here with you, Father. I enjoy being on the bridge.
The story will skip ahead a few decades, just so that the kid, Icona, can get his own spaceship. After all, it'll grow up with him.
Father, I don't know what to say. But isn't it illegal to own a ship at my age?
It's such a light-hearted opening which feels unbelievably strange. Come on, son, let's go harvest the life essence of the Fallen.
Yay! Kill them! Awesome birthday present.
When you're pitching this setting, does anyone want to see this? I'll try shunting, that's a good trick. Icona and his Omni Cruiser grow up off-screen, so we don't get the more sentimental bits of H.R. Giger's Aragon. Icona is a commander now, and his hair has died out of embarrassment. He's morphed into being The Rock. And the Chair of 3 wants him to hunt down the Universal Heart, which his father went missing looking for. The Heart is, supposedly, where all life comes from. And there's only a single galaxy.
Wait, what was that from? Was that from, Oblivion? That looked like Elder Scrolls.
Left that people haven't checked.
Captain, we've reached the last unexplored galaxy in the universe.
On its own, that's an insane thing to hear. But this galaxy has aliens that possess organoids. And that's the gist of the campaign. Wipe out your enemies and find the heart. For now, let's talk about the graphics. To be fair, the shaders aren't at the full potential they could be since it's outright broken. Though even with that, for a 2007 strategy game, it looks pretty good. A lot of it comes from how smartly they use lights and color. Like, if you zoom in all the way on a spaceship, the texture won't be that sharp, but how parts glow and how color is arranged across it is really interesting. When you're not zoomed into it and playing the game normally, the ships do have a living quality to them. You see how different flesh and metal parts reflect in the sun, lights flicker on and off. Their general design can resemble ancient sea life or twisted forms of the human body. The ships being organic isn't some kind of lore afterthought, it is front and center and gross. A space station isn't just a safe harbor, it's a pulsating flesh reservoir. You don't have to harvest the field, you harvest the station. Your collectors are basically horrible, gigantic mosquitoes, and you can physically see them getting engorged with blood when they collect it. While they're the best at powering your economy, since blood is also currency in this setting, most of your ships are able to drain blood, including in the middle of battle.
Holy moly. Oh man, it's so disgusting. But also really cool as a concept. I'm glad that they really played into it though, because undoubtedly this really sets this game apart from everything else. If only the game had worked upon release.
By harvesting enemy corpse ships, your own vessels can slowly heal themselves. So when your own ships are getting wounded, they can plug an IV into their enemy and start vampiring their health away.
Suck their blood.
Along with collecting any mutations they find to add into your own gene bank. There is some thinking to this, since some more destructive weapons have a higher chance of outright obliterating enemy ships, but playing it riskier means having a higher chance of getting a ship carcass, which is more literal blood, sweat, and tears for your war machine. Most weapons are genes that you use to mutate your craft. These are mutations that you physically see on the models too. You can watch new weapons grow out, or parts of the ship extend, or strange appendages coming out of it.
Dude, this is fucking cool. Also, what the that does look like a very strange appendage, doesn't it? But in a way, this kinda reminds me of Spore. There's something really neat about seeing something evolve over time, and I think it's really important to have that visual feedback for the player, because these are things that you've gone out of your way to obtain, right? So anybody would want to see the fruits of their labor. This also adds a lot of replayability to the game, because you could go for completely different strategies depending on the genes that you obtained, and having different ships that require you to maneuver them very differently from each other.
I know I said the mothership in Homeworld basically gave birth to new craft. That is actually what's happening here. Blowing up a station is killing a gigantic being, ripping the shell away and sending your roaches in to clean up the remains. It's like watching a fight in Star Wars and a whale fall at the same time. They even grounded a bit by having you encounter forces that use traditional spaceships. And when they go up against your primordial sea monsters, you're clearly the villain there. Visually, just playing the game is so excellent at making humanity an eldritch nightmare. You either die, or fall in line with the universal rulers. Though there are alien forces that are terrors in their own right, with their own cool, unique designs.
They are very cool. Like, the ship designs are very inspired. I don't think I've seen anything like these before.
Still, I think bioships are very underused in sci-fi, and Genesis Rising has some amazing designs, and others are deli-wrapped Cylon raiders. This also makes the rest of the tone way more psychotic.
Captain Icona. I think you should avoid talking to the Vicar until...
Until what?
Until you're a little more sober, sir.
Enough, soldier. Connect me to Juno.
Look, great value Captain Diomedes getting obliterated is already odd, but they went the extra mile to show he's drinking out of some kind of living conch shell. That is a creature that lives solely to sweat Everclear. This is the future Serbia wants. It probably saves money. This extends to the holograms, which are actually shape formers. So instead of calling someone, you temporarily generate a homunculus clone of them. Or something. And don't you worry, this gets one hell of a payoff later. Getting back to it, the environment looks good too, with lots of bold, striking colors. I would have liked some pitch black space to balance things out, but I guess that's how it goes in the last unexplored galaxy. When the background is more dim, I really appreciate the weapon and ship lights and how they contrast against the background. Even the box art leaned into that, which is how I noticed it at Best Buy back in the day. It promised a creepy bloodship future, and on that, it delivered in spades. The idea of Genesis Rising and how creative it is visually is without a doubt the strongest part of the game. The most barren...
I mean, that's great, but also, that just means everything else is, maybe not as great. Regardless though, this seems like a really cool setting with a bunch of inspired ideas. With so many different ways that it can be taken, I hope that they're still able to deliver. However, my confidence is, somewhat lacking, considering the voice acting that we've gotten so far. Or maybe it's actually pretty decent voice acting, and I've just gotten spoiled by Homeworld.
Are the endgame shapeformer cutscenes, but in comparison to their sound design, these look like masterpieces. I'll show you why.
This mission, the search for the heart, it is a terrible mistake.
It is no mistake, Bishop.
I see.
There are no ambient effects, no music, it's just you and the voices. Right now it's just me and the voices. Alone. Diplomacy has never felt more confrontational and awkward.
Why did you attack us?
You will show respect. It is you who invaded our space.
It's not a bug, it's just the game. The ambient sound design is also more empty, but not going for realism, they just don't have that many effects.
Oh, rip. Yeah, in a space game, I expect there to be some really good music and sound design. Unfortunately, that's probably what was lacking here, and why the voice acting felt so off. Even if, you know, maybe it could have melded well together, with some ambient noise at the very least. It just comes off as unnatural.
If it's not music, you hear weapon fire.
Crushing opposition.
It's generic and definitely undercooked for this time period. There were strategy games 10 years before this with way better soundscapes and much smaller budgets. It can also drive me nuts and some fights sound like a child fiddling with a lightsaber. Not to mention, for how over-the-top the setting is, the actual in-game voice acting can be weirdly casual. Especially after the intro, they rarely gel with the world they're inhabiting. I thought they set a clear tone.
Time to die.
Oh man, the juxtaposition of that was incredible. Time to die. It almost sounded just like another line from a different Mandalore video. It's smoothie time.
Suck them dry.
I don't know. I feel a disconnect.
Every single line, it's just so friggin' good, man. But yeah, that is like the importance of voice acting right here. It really needs to convey the emotion, and you really need to sell that you are a person living within this universe, which is why like Warhammer 40k absolutely nails the voice acting in pretty much every single game that I've ever seen. There may be jankiness here and there in other areas, but never the voice acting. This one is very undercooked, for sure.
There are some characters that are better, but it's still very budget.
Genocide is on the way.
That's more like it. The soundtrack is the biggest audio standout. A decent amount of it is your standard RTS battle orchestra kind of sound, but like the wailing in the intro, sometimes it taps into something way more unique. As an example, here's the more traditional space game music.
Yeah, very spacey. Very Star Wars.
Still great production value, especially considering the rest of the soundscape. Then you have a track like Cruciform that steps it up.
Yeah, very fitting for the atmosphere. Okay, well, yeah, we do have some great music.
There's a little more emotion showing with those. The issue comes from how often you hear the generic battle theme over and over again. The composer has so much range that's just underused. There's one part where you're investigating a new alien race based around crystals and ice, and the soundtrack is just people and children whispering. It's like they're trying to make a tuba or something. So the game can have its moments of standout music, but it's mostly... It is a letdown how they used what they had a lot of the time, but there are some gems in there. I've seen some around in a fairly popular Homeworld 2 mod, but never in a Warhammer lore video or something like that. Maybe that'll change now. Okay, let's talk about the game itself. It's Homeworld on bath salts. I guess that's not too fair since mechanically they are very different, but there's a lot of influence here. Beyond similarities in the visuals and structure and even some missions near one-to-one, you also command a persistent fleet throughout the campaign. This wasn't uncommon at the time, since almost every space RTS game definitely had some Homeworld influence. The difference is the story and writing in Homeworld makes something like a persistent fleet feel like it matters, whereas here in other games you go, oh, that's convenient. Besides, Genesis Rising takes place in a 2D plane, since very few games still wanted to tackle the 3D space element.
Yeah, that 3D aspect, I feel like, would add so much more complexity to making the game, so I don't blame them. The fact that Homeworld was able to pull it off is very impressive. But it's always a shame to see in games like these, when they do have some really good stuff there, but it's just kind of hidden amongst all the other mediocre stuff. Great ideas, but not great execution throughout.
There's no kind of veterancy, but the persistent fleet is neat for capturing enemy ships. So if you grab a lab ship, you can build everything that your adversary has. This still sounds better than it is because there are barely any ships per faction. Besides your Omni-Cruiser, you can only build 3 kinds of combat ships, and not that many. Most ships don't...
I mean, I guess to be fair, a lot of the development time likely went into all these evolutions, appendages and stuff that we could add onto the ships. So not having a massive variety is kind of offset by the fact that they can be customized like that. But still, we focused our efforts into a system that added more depth but also cut off depth that we could have added by simply making more units. So I guess in that aspect, we kind of just got a net zero. It didn't really improve upon anything. I could be wrong here, but that's just what it seems like.
Don't innately have abilities either, they're just platforms for more mutations. So bigger ships have more health and more options determined by you. With a persistent fleet, you might think how genes and mutations work in the campaign could be harsh, but it's not at all. When you find a new gene by shunting it out of a corpse or trading for it, that gene becomes permanently unlocked in your bank. It's more like you're unlocking the template for it instead of a singular item. But you can also find and trade for special items which are exactly that. Single-use modifications that you lose if the ship is destroyed, something like a stun ability or nuclear missiles. As the campaign goes on, you can eventually find genes for the special items as well, so they're more just a temporary help. You'll also be finding upgraded genes which cost more blood to equip on your ship, but are better at what they do. Simple enough so far, but what stops you from making a min-maxing dick ship? For one, mutating a ship actually increases its max health, but it's not filled in immediately. After upgrading, the ship will need to fill up or be healed another way. This makes shifting in battle a bad idea. On top of that, any active abilities like a purge or a shield or some kind of special missile will generate heat.
Wait, does this mean If shifting in mid-battle is a bad idea, then maybe we have like some sort of grace period after a battle before you head into like the next portal to the next level, and that's when you would want to do it.
When it overheats, it can't use abilities again until it cools down, which means you can put a death missile on something like a station, but it'll take forever to recharge. Now on paper, and at a few points in the game, the system is really engaging. You do some easy-baked gene splicing before a fight, determine what abilities work best on what ships, and with so few ships but all these mutations, it looks like there should be a lot of tactical depth to the game. Except there really isn't, and beyond that, the interface makes everything a pain in the ass to play. On the balance side, when you discover the freeze gene, which immobilizes your enemy for ages, including stations, most other active abilities go in the trash.
Yeah, I feel like that's always the case with these sort of systems, where ultimately people are going to find the most optimal route, and then once you know that, it's like, then why would I build anything else, right? That was actually kind of how I felt when I was playing through Mechanicus. I still gotta go back to the DLC, but I think the DLC adds a whole nother class that might be even more busted. Regardless of that though, there are just certain things within these skill trees that you would want to pick up on basically all of your tech priests, because there are ways to give yourself like infinite resources, or I believe it was cognition points in the game, that you would basically use in order to move, dash, or use your attacks. And if you could obtain an infinite number of these, it kind of trivialized all the combat because, like, yeah, you could just use the most powerful weapons in the game and end it as quick as possible. While I was playing through it, I had to force myself to not use these things, but like, it's there. This is something that the player has to put upon themselves, which I don't think is a very fun system. And I mean, the reason why I didn't want to use them was because I wanted a diverse cast, you know? But there's obviously one very good way to level up all of your units, and they could all be the same, and they'd all be able to output infinite amounts of damage. However, that's just not fun. This is also likely why these type of games don't have these systems. Or if they do, it's a much more simplified version, because it can be very difficult to balance.
While they look neat visually, besides the soft or hard damage aspect, I didn't feel much of a difference between most of the weapons. Short range especially could feel completely interchangeable. The late game does try to open up more tactical and utility items, especially in one mission that makes the most out of the system, having you resurrect enemy ships and moving abilities around, but at that point your fleet is enough of a murder machine that it doesn't matter that much. Hearing that, you might think the game is overly easy, but no, this can be a tough one for all the wrong reasons. You can't save any kind of gene loadout or build to quickly drag onto a ship, so every time you build a new one, you have to go into the menu and manually mutate it by click dragging. Different genes also don't have different hotkeys, it's just the same use active ability hotkey. To manually use one means clicking on the icon above the craft or on the side panel. And you never get used to where things are because where the ships and mutations are moving around all the time. It's also hard to tell from the footage, but the mouse has a ton of weird drag to it. The interface is clearly meant for a 4:3 ratio since it's stretched out, but the game itself does support widescreen. All the cutscenes are in widescreen. I'm not sure what's going on there, but the mouse lacks precision and feels clunky to use. There's other strangeness, like
That doesn't sound like such a great idea for a RTS game that requires you to be on the ball at all times and clicking all these different buttons in order to cast these abilities for all your different ships. Surprisingly enough, while I did think that the homeworld UI was a kind of a lot to look at, but seeing this, I can actually appreciate it a lot more for just making more sense to me at least. Although, I guess a big part of the issue was the evolution mechanic that we introduced, so we had to figure out a way to make that viable.
Space to toggle mutations showing up in the side panels, but then they'll disappear. It turns out the ships are camera shy, and if they're on screen, their ability will disappear from the panel so you can click on the ship itself, if it's actually in your field of view. There was a toggle to make them show up permanently, but that would either crash the game or make it more prone to crashing. I have no clue why that's not on by default. The interface being so clunky makes you prey to your biggest enemy, the missiles. One of the missile genes has slight lock-on, extreme range, and gets more powerful the longer it's in the air. When you launch them at enemies, they rarely hit, but when they launch them at you just die.
Ship destroyed.
I cannot count how many times I got own-zoned by missiles. You're notified for long-range weapons that don't matter constantly. Like, look out, a breeder's on the way. That's nothing. So you might miss someone somewhere has launched a missile, and then a ship gets insta-killed at full health. These aren't super weapons either, it's just a long-range mutation you could slap on any ship. The notification could mean a light tickle or you are now instant bone jelly. You might get the notification during a fight thinking it's a short-range missile from there, but really it's from across the map and you won't be seeing it for a minute or so.
Not a great design. I suppose it makes sense though from a more realistic perspective, but I can just imagine the frustration with having to deal with this mechanic that I can't really truly interact with. I just gotta constantly always be on my toes to watch out for it, or else it can completely screw up my entire game plan. It's essentially kind of the same issue as, like, say, Widowmaker in Overwatch, where she could just sit in a corner and just head tap people. Everybody would die, and there wouldn't really be too much counterplay to that, apart from obviously taking out Widowmaker. But I feel like a lot of players were kind of frustrated from that because they couldn't interact with that. However, it is a mechanic in the game, so you just kind of have to deal with it. I never played Overwatch though, but that's just what I've heard.
This is also a good time to remind you there's no in-mission saving. You can be on a map for a half hour or more, let an important ship out of your sight for a little too long, and it gets zapped by a missile. I was living in terror of these fucking things, and even with my paranoia, I was still barely dodging them in time. Usually the missile would sail past the targeted ship and obliterate something else. And that's fine until the game crashes. I only know some things likely to cause a crash, and one is a large ship dying. There were simple missions I spent hours on purely from crashing or from getting fox-2'd by a space whale. It was getting to a point I don't often for videos where I considered scrapping it purely from how often the thing was crashing or I was getting missiled.
No.
I was starting to remember—
And this is Mandalore of all people who was considering this. Like, he's gone through hell and back again with some of these games. I'm pretty sure some of his computers bricked because some of them, but I can certainly understand the frustration of having to deal with a game that is constantly crashing. Looking at you, Fallout New Vegas. It works for the most part, but when it crashes during an important story moment that you're super into it and you're pretty far into a mission, you're just like, come on, dude. It's never fun to lose progress.
Remember why I hadn't finished this game all those years ago. Should I push through for the story? It's not like a good story. And then I saw The Rock make first contact with an alien race.
Nothing's happening.
Ooh. Now that's why we want to continue playing.
Whoa! Ha ha ha! Interesting proportions.
No, you can't do this to me. You do that and it's like, now I have to see what happens. I'm not sure how to sum up—
Hey, if it works, it works. I'm here for it now. Like, what is this stupid humor? It goes against the entire tone that we've set up, but I guess that's not the first instance of us acting against our tone.
Sum up the story. A lot of it was surprise filler, and the other parts were written like something from the Pepsi-verse. It has some interesting ideas, but the kind of ideas you'd find scrawled in feces at a bus stop. I will be getting into spoilers since I really can't tell where a stopping point is in the story. There are also choices to make and several different endings depending on what you do in the final mission. When you receive your mission to hunt for the heart, you meet Vicar Juno, the representative of the bishop. He introduces your choice mechanic, blue balled or red balled. Obviously, the intention is that blue is the friendly, diplomatic option, and red is an aggressive response. So I try both on Infinity, the head of the judges. Most responses boil down to yes or sarcastic yes, and many Western RPGs would perfect this formula in the following years. No matter what, Infinity is very interested in you.
We are very much alike, you and I. When you return, perhaps we could spend some quality time together.
Perhaps.
But look what happens when I choose Paragon Rock here.
You deny that you are Defiance? State your designation.
I have enough trouble, I'll try to be nice to the Strogg, and we'll see—
No! Why would you think we are Defiance?
Red is worse than that?
Designation? Human. We're called humans.
No, they're just assigned to the wrong button sometimes. So the aliens with the organic—
It's a true 50-50.
ships are the Defiance. They're a confederation of races against the human empire, including some that humanity thought they wiped out ages ago. This is a great idea for when you're playing as the heel. You can learn about the races humans have stomped down, and then decide how to deal with them. You'll have some options of where you can travel to first, or even go off track or backtrack. Typically, this only means getting your standard skirmish map with maybe an opportunity for new genes, but I appreciate the attempt at putting the journey more in your hands, even if it's pretty barren. Anyhow, the Defiance are also nasty in their own way. They've been oppressing the local Strogg for years, who are all too happy to join you on your genocide. There may not be many Defiance, but they are a major threat. They've invented parasitic weaponry which can consume a living ship from the inside out, and if they get around, humanity's greatest weapons will be useless. It establishes a mystery of how they were formed and discovered the secrets of organids. Does it have something to do with the heart? Well, that whole thread dies quietly, because while searching for the heart, the Defiant suddenly erupt into civil war. During your journey, you've seen mysterious pillars that have traces of blood air, which is apparently a sign of the universal heart. These pillars are the Lapis altars. Half of the Defiants think that destroying them will anger the Lapis gods and cause the apocalypse. The other half believes that not destroying them will cause the apocalypse. Tough break.
Fool! If these altars are not destroyed, the Lapis will come!
From what I've been told, they'll come if you do destroy the altars.
Preposterous! The locals think the Lapis are gods, but the truth is that they are a primitive species. Without these altars, they aren't even capable of space travel.
You learn more about the Lapis from the Cold Whites. They're a mysterious, all-female tit race that you saw in the big cutscene.
You can put an eye out with those things, lady.
They're called the Cold Whites because they live in the cold part of space. And are white. They do.
Oh, truly an inspired name. I guess maybe the multiple endings has something to do with potentially who you side with or whether or not you destroy the pillars. A classic scenario here of misinformation. Possibly something that was kind of like passed down through the generations, but somewhere along the line somebody misspoke it and people started believing in other things by finding new evidence. It happens all the time.
You point you in the direction of the Lapis themselves, who are rock people. They build their ships from asteroids and are essentially thinking rocks. They don't communicate with outsiders, only attack them, which is why some aliens theorize that they're not sentient at all, and that just comes from the pillars. They do follow blood air, which again means heart. At this point, Infinity and Vicar Juno arrive, and the Rock explains what's happening. He still wants to go track down the heart, but the Chair of Three demands the Defiants die, and they're defeated the next mission. This leads to a 2-year time skip, which is where you spend your time getting piss drunk with the piss juice. Mankind rules the sector, and instead of hunting down the heart, you do errands like taking the aliens to mass. You get missions, shaking extraterrestrials in their bed going, "Wake up! It's time for church." You especially need some Hail Marys. You might need some too if you enter the romance with Infinity. This is a fairy tale romance.
Wow. Look at that.
Now, tell her what every woman wants to hear in this moment.
Don't worry, Infinity. I won't tell anyone.
Huh?
Captain! Is there something wrong with the shape form?
No, I don't think so. I was just making contact with this woman.
Oh my god.
Woo! I see. I was just curious as to why we haven't left yet.
Legal issues. I have to take care of some details before we can leave. Red.
What? What the fuck is this comedic bit? What? Well, rumors about the captain are gonna start spreading, that's for sure.
Tape, you know?
I wish they'd just let us do our job.
It's like they can't decide between Warhammer 40k or Farscape. They can't decide Is he going for the fish?
What?
It's so messy, and only the more fanatical characters actually feel authentic for the setting it's showing. They package the game with epic choirs and monstrous spaceships. Then characters get to talking, and it's half B-movie and half YouTube poop. Except not nearly that fun, and how some things are resolved is so unsatisfying. To wrap up the mess arc, the Lapis attack by throwing rocks, as they were lured there by the traitorous Cold Whites, which means killing the Cold White leader, and killing the Defiants.
What? Okay, calm down, man.
Again. Juno is so pleased by this that he sends you out to look for the heart again. The enigmatic cerebral race might know more.
Look! It's another Juno creature!
I know they seem trustworthy, but they give you the runaround until you just murder them for the information, which is to put the pillars in the right order, but your father appears to tell you that he found the heart and it imprisoned him, and it'll surely imprison you too, but the magic rocks already opened the portal, which will surely lead to the heart.
Yeah, right? Totally.
Father?
Oh.
Am I dead?
No, son. I brought you here to make certain that you don't die.
You mean I'm in the past?
Yes.
But why?
It is easy for them to kill you now, in the past.
Who's them?
You will see.
I have been skimming over details, but I promise you, we did not need time travel.
Right? Oh my god, it complicates things so much. Like, it's so frustrating when people immediately jump on the hate bandwagon whenever time travel is involved. But I can kind of understand why, because there are so many series out there that simply use it as a plot device in order to reset something that had happened and take the series in a new direction because, you know, maybe we ran out of ideas and this was the only solution to our problem that we created. It can be fun, but it also comes at the detriment of people who had been following the series up to that point, and now everything that they were kind of invested in was reset. It's not a great feeling. However, there are shows out there like Steins Gate, one of my most favorite anime of all time, that do time travel really, really well. And that's mostly because the entire series is based off of it. And of course, there are some negatives to the series, and that is linked to the essence of time travel itself, with lacking character development in the rest of the cast because they don't experience the time travel that our main character does. But that's something that is inherently accounted for because the series is based off of time travel, not something that randomly shows up like this. Although, like, from all the cutscenes that we've seen, what did I expect? This was probably inevitable. At this point, though, like, I gotta see where it goes because I'm so invested in this, how would you describe it? It's kind of like a car crash in slow motion. I just want to see the impact.
You play back in the baby Omnicruiser with your dad in the past fighting ships from the future. You win, travel back to the future, reunite with your fleet, and then defeat the giant 3 Portal Guardian heads. Which puts you back to where things were, except you then get the only diplomacy scene with music.
Is this the future?
What?
Actually, no. It is the past. The far distant past.
Huh?
I don't understand.
Wait, what? So what was the point of the time travel then? We go back in the past to stay safe, your father protects you, destroys the ships in the future, and then you just go back and, okay? But why?
If we're in the past, why are you...
I have spent over 50 years in a past so distant that humans don't yet exist. Or at least they didn't, until I came here and established a new human empire of my own.
So Juno went back in time to create an even more overpowered human empire, which is the Inquisition, and he can do this because the heart controls time, and he wanted Icona dead because he thought he was a liability for no reason.
I forgive you. All of that is in the past. Or the future, actually. Time travel. It can be a bit confusing.
I wasn't oversimplifying
no
there.
kidding.
The plan really is just to make the human empire even more awesomer. It's not till mid-conversation that the band wakes up.
What about
Why?
the Cherub 3? I can't imagine they're too happy about your little foray into the past.
They don't know about this. And they will never find out, because they will never exist. No more meddling from fools who do not deserve the positions conveyed upon them. Come, Icon. You can be a part of this. Join me as my admiral. Lead my armies to glory. Glory for all mankind.
You cannot join him here. It's a ridiculous plan, but why not? He even offers to help get Dad back if you join him, and Icona still says no. This is the apex of how disjointed everything has been. We've been playing an evil genocidal empire, wiping out enemies left and right all game, but they still want to play you off as being Space McGunn's fun adventure man, who is, at best, indifferent to aliens as long as they align with his goals. He doesn't want to break the timeline and get everything he's wanted and more because Juno's the bad guy. If your character was played as a villain with ambitions for power, going up against Juno because he'll be the supreme ruler would make sense here.
Yeah, right? I actually wouldn't mind a series like that, where you're playing as the bad guy and you do bad things because you're bad. Like, it just makes sense. We've already done all this horrible stuff. Like, what's to say that we don't want more power? And I mean, obviously, like, morally, you probably shouldn't agree with this, but like, the setup leading towards this doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering the setting. In Homeworld, we had a whole bunch of puzzle pieces that fit together and flowed into each other. Here, the puzzle pieces, they don't match. We have 2 different sets from 2 different puzzles. And yet, somehow, with it not being connected, it still somewhat makes a picture of a game that is intriguing, even if it's all broken.
Everything else in the setting and the game screams that you should be evil, yet they didn't commit to it. Imagine how fun an evil space captain could be. Throwing aliens out the airlock, announcing mandatory blood taxes, and dropping awful one-liners. I want mustache-twirling villain, or at least dedicated space marine. This is just empty. You do escape Juno and make contact with the Lapis, who point you towards their leader.
Why are you attacking me?
You destroyed the Lapis altars.
Oh god.
Destroyed them? No, that hasn't happened yet. That happens in the future.
It is all the same.
Past that is the boss battle with the giant rock ship that has your dad. And you meet the Lapis leader, Melagio.
God.
Do you see him now?
I don't see anything but a planet. Is the planet his vessel?
He is the first brother. He is Melagio. He requires no vessel.
Who said that?
That's Melagio.
Melagio reveals many secrets of the universe. The most alarming one being that he is beefing on a personal level with God. Melagio was supposed to be the only life form in the universe, but then God made more life to piss him off. He and God are no longer on speaking terms, and it's not clear what caused the fight. But as revenge against all life, Melagio created the Lapis. They obliterate everything on sight because this is the Rock's big revenge against God.
Against all life? Then how come the Lapis are only found in this part of the universe?
In the beginning, this was all of the universe. But God betrayed Melagio yet again and expanded the universe.
Oh my god, gosh darn it, Mandalore. From the rock eyebrow raising meme to this. Although, I suppose this is more in line with the tone that these cutscenes have been in. It's just lighthearted fun in this grimdark universe.
All of existence was made purely to spite this dude. Nothing in the Old Testament comes within leagues of being this petty. Apparently, Juno has planted some kind of organid device in the heart of the universe. If you destroy it, Melagio will protect the heart and contain the Lapis for all of eternity. Then Dad calls to say no, destroy Melagio's control rock, no one should control the heart of the universe. And Juno is online too, telling you to mutate his device so that you can rule the galaxy forever.
Then here's the multiple endings, I'm assuming.
Now you show down with your greatest rival, the other two endings.
Funny. I was about to say the same thing. Then you must know what I'm thinking. You think we got too close to the heart, and Juno used that to his advantage. I'm glad we understand each other. We should use this phenomenon to our advantage. To finish what we started? Exactly. I know exactly what we should do. Me too. So do I.
It all led to this, all the crashing, all the missile murders. A crazy man arguing over what god rock to kick.
Who thought of this? Who thought this was a good idea for this one guy to just talk to himself over and over? These three people. Oh, God. Like, the idea itself is kind of flawed, but you can pull it off. There have been video games that I played where there are, like, basically the same character is talking to each other. But in those scenarios, I feel like the voice actors for those characters, they have enough of a range to make their character have a slightly distinct voice to them that is different from the other character that you're more familiar with, and yet still recognizable as them. Unfortunately here, that's not really the case, and Bro is a little bit monotone. Which, you know, I'm not gonna hate on, because I am too. But it certainly makes this very hilarious as an experience.
Talk about your split decisions. You know, I've been around you guys for about a minute now, and I already don't like you. Either of you. The feeling's mutual. I think I know how to handle this.
Supported by the numbers.
Fight.
I'm sorry, I just needed a little break.
Three of me and I still can't make a decision.
I didn't even realize it was Homeworld.
I'm pretty hard to convince when I think I'm right. Me too. Maybe we should go through the portal again. See which one of us makes it through.
Jesus Christ, they fight. They all fight.
Okay.
And wouldn't you know it, it's one of the hardest missions because they mirror your ships, your genes, everything you have. They also appear to be teamed up against you because I never saw them fight each other.
What the frick? So they have every single thing that you have, but you have to fight both of them at the same time. So literally, you just gotta outplay them. 2 to 1. Huh?
So the trick here is to completely scrap your own fleet and sell off everything. In a move of ultimate catharsis, you can give them the one-shot missile. Even though it's technically still you being one-shot.
Oh my god. Oh my god. This is the big brain tactic. I think in Elden Ring, there's like a boss fight where it completely mirrors you. And people have done the exact same thing of taking off all their gear and then just slap each other and do no damage. But I mean, is this really the best way to go about it for a final fight? Like, it sounds like a cool idea on paper. I don't think it ever works in execution. And by it not working in execution is this 2-on-1 kind of thing. I don't know if it's meant to be that way, or if the game is just bugged and they were all meant to do like a free-for-all kind of thing. In which case, yeah, that makes a little more sense, but yeah, in practice, it's not working.
Sayonara to 2 rocks in a hard place. Though to give the game credit, every ending does have a fully animated cutscene. If you take Melagio's deal, the Chair of 3 is irritated, but life goes on. They'll take another crack at Ultimate Ascension or whatever the plan was at another point in the future. Melagio keeps his word, and Dad is replaced in eternal prison with Juno.
You've robbed me of my place in eternity. I must take my place next to God. No! No! Ah!
If you do what Dad asked and wipe out the stone, Icona considers it as being returning control to God. Strangely, it's this ending where we see some lust for power brewing in him.
The heart was not ours to take. Not yet.
Not
you may rule
yet.
the material side of the universe, but we have much to learn about the spiritual beings that we aspire to be.
Juno is still alive, but younger again for some reason. A lot of his Inquisition soldiers survived somehow and will be secretly breeding a new army. With all the time travel shenanigans, I have no idea how this works.
I don't know, man. It's probably young Xehanort. He's back at it again.
These endings are each about 2 minutes long. Naturally, the one where you side with Juno to make humanity the ultimate power in the universe is the shortest one and considered the bad ending.
Welcome to the new eternity, my son. I hope it was worth it.
I don't understand. This game frustrates me to no end. Even if it was completely stable and not full of janky bugs, it's still not a game I'd recommend unless you desperately wanted to see these ships for yourself. It's clearly lifting a lot from Warhammer, but when it goes out on its own direction, it can get really fascinating at times.
Yeah.
It was brought up abruptly, but God feuding with someone causing the universe is an out there idea that you could expand on more. Hell, even scaled down, evil human empire with organic ships is an idea that rules. But with how the
like, you can certainly see the inspiration here, but yeah, these were inspired ideas. These were things that I haven't seen before. And there were so many opportunities that were created from this new direction. We did have some pretty good things that came out of this and a ton of memes, but like, ultimately, it's just not worth playing, I feel like. Too much clunkiness mixed in with the good. It's unfortunate though, because I could totally see this becoming like its own franchise, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
Mutation system works and how clunky and unbalanced it is. It's no wonder that the game didn't take off since skirmish mode isn't worth going to and you're not getting on multiplayer. The thing is, when I play these janky Eastern European games that are largely forgotten, even when the execution sucks, there are always cool ideas present. It's buggy and clunky and the tone isn't a Vitamix, but even after all these years, the image of a spaceship exploding into blood never left me. They made a future where mankind is lost, blood is fuel, and hell was made to aggravate a space rock. The Organids are still the height of bioships for me. The only setting I can think of that's similar is the Leviathan trilogy of books. It's an alternate World War I where the Central Powers use mechs, and the Allies made war machines by playing God with DNA. Sadly, they're more YA books, but the Keith Thompson art books are worth picking up. And that about covers it.
Freaking cool, man! I've never heard of that before. I'll have to take a look at it after recording.
For Genesis Rising. It's one of those games where someday someone will do something incredible with the idea. Even with all its migraine features, I can't deny there is cool stuff here. I tried my best to get into it.
I kind of felt this exact same way about Ghostmaster, I think was the name of the game. It was another review that Mandalore did. And that game had some really cool stuff in it. I think it would be a banger of a game, but it required much better execution. This is in that exact same vein. We just really need to come up with a concrete direction and not have all this weird, janky juxtaposition stuff. It just, a very clear message to send as well. Like, if you're gonna be bad, be bad. If you're gonna be good, then be good. If you're gonna give your player a choice, then actually give them a choice.
But in the end, I couldn't smell what the Rock was cooking.
The system is freezing. Let's find what we need and get out as soon as possible.
A long time ago, way back in history, when all there was to drink was nothing but Crusade.
What's a multiplayer experience I can't recreate but remember fondly? My go-to is always Battle Swarm because that game got shut down. Tremulous is a good runner-up. I think it's playable but just doesn't have players. What is my opinion?
I don't really have an experience like that I can't re-emulate anymore. The closest thing I can think of is like back in the day, I think back when I was like 13, 14, playing League of Legends with friends. It was actually fun when you had a full team and you didn't have some random person on your team flaming you for not doing something that he was clearly in the wrong for. And we had actually recently gotten back into it because we were able to get a team of 5, and that's like the only time I'll ever play League. But with the new monetization updates to League of Legends, I kind of lost all motivation to play it anymore. I don't know what they're doing. It's almost as if Riot is like a small indie company and they need the money or something.
I love that name. What is my opinion on Ubisoft using AI writers? I mean, there are exceptions, but a lot of stuff from there has already felt like it was written by robots. From what I understand, for now they're using it for random background chatter, supposedly to help the writers focus on the core stuff, but it's Ubisoft. Someone up there is hoping to replace a lot more people with machines. Can I get—
Oh yeah, 100%. I am actually okay with it being used to help write NPC dialogue, especially if it's used in like open world games with adaptive NPC dialogue. That would certainly cut down on a whole lot of time and let the writers really focus on the meat and potatoes of the story. But generally speaking, I don't feel like AI writing will ever be able to replace creative human writers, or even like AI video editors. The videos that they make just don't feel right. Like, even if their edits are clean and it actually makes sense, it's just, there's something deep inside of you that you can tell that the thing that made this isn't human and it lacks any passion. I don't really know how else to describe it, and maybe it's just a me thing, but that's how I feel like.
Give a hint about the size 2 fish. Has no one actually caught it yet? I figured more people would have it by now. Do I plan way ahead for the adventure game videos? Some stuff is on rotation, so I don't know which comes first, but essentially, yeah. It was fun seeing a lot of people notice Glug for the first time in the Druids video. Any chance for Darkest of Days? There are 3 or 4 time travel games I'd like to cover in a block, like one a week. So that'll take some more outlining, but Darkest of Days is one of them. That's another of those cool ideas, not great execution games.
Damn.
This is fun.
I don't get it.
But honestly though, like the delivery on some of these lines would make for some pretty good redeems.